I am really delighted. We talked to people on this show, and I was like, "Where were you when my kids were little?" And have really, if you have children that you need to get moved around from place to place with a trustworthy person, Sarah Schaer has the app for you. So I'm not going to say anything more about it. Sarah, tell us what you're doing. You have a couple minutes to talk, and then we'll ask questions.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for having me. It's amazing. It's been amazing hearing the other contributors as well. I think I have a lot in common, from consulting to cats to horses, with all of you. But in this case, yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Kango, which is safe rides and care for kids. It's actually the third startup that I've worked at, but the first that I've co-founded. And the way that came about was actually at the previous startup, snapfish.com, which was acquired by HP. It was the dawn of digital photography, when digital cameras were a new thing and smartphones didn't even exist yet. I was running a global product management team across 22 countries and a bunch of different time zones. And I had become a mom along the way, and I had two preschoolers. And for the life of me, I could not figure out how to manage their schedules now that they needed to go outside the home to preschool and back, on a daily basis. My husband worked over an hour away down the peninsula. I'm in San Francisco. It was terrible traffic, and all existing childcare solutions that I tried just were not built for transportation. So I ended up leaving Snapfish after building it into what was a really exciting multinational online photo and video company, and took the plunge. I stepped off the ledge and co-founded Kango with one of the former lead engineers that I worked with in product management at Snapfish. And so it was the dawn of smartphones at the time. We didn't exactly know what the product and the company would be, but I just had this incredible pain in my life that everyone seemed to share as a parent. How do you get your kids safely where they need to go in a way that is trustworthy, trackable, where the vetting, which is a key part, is taken care of for you? And really, the concept of it takes a village, which is still true, but with a smartphone now, is there a way to put that in your pocket, so that you can take that with you and have that? So we first had a number of sort of trial and error moments. We built, being product and engineering, we built smartphone apps to at first allow parents to connect with each other and trade rides or carpool together. But pretty quickly it became apparent from all the customer feedback that yes, this was a universal challenge. Yes, indeed, there was no good solution for this. And that, while smartphones were cool, this was really not just voice, text, and data. This was about kids, and you needed people. But what that came down to was parents kept asking us, well, I don't have anyone I can carpool with, or my carpool fell apart. Do you have drivers that you can supply? Have you done the vetting? I don't have an idea as a parent, how to get someone fingerprinted and background checked and get their vehicle inspected. And what about insurance? And so that's really where we saw the value that people were willing to pay for, and that was going to be a viable solution for the huge challenge that was really kind of jeopardizing women's careers, putting marriages under tension, keeping kids from going to activities. And in my own, early childhood, I can remember being taken, from age 4 onward, to horseback riding, which was my sport actually. And so it really was a huge problem that I was deeply passionate about solving. So we could go into more detail, but our first round of funding came from an accelerator, 500 startups up here in the Bay Area. We pivoted into what became, a ride-sharing company. So we are a ride-sharing company, but we are also a licensed childcare provider. And so all of our drivers have childcare experience. Yes, it has the convenience of an Uber. Sometimes we've been called Uber for kids, but it really is more childcare on wheels. So you can download Kango from the App Store on iPhone or Android. You can book childcare, you can book rides, you can do it on demand, or you can schedule a regular driver. We pride ourselves on having a very personal touch. And also being licensed and insured to transport kids of any age, from babies needing car seats, which we supply, to high schoolers who maybe, have a dance that they need to safely get home from at night. So that's what we provide now up and down the state of California, from San Francisco down to San Diego, and also in Arizona. So delighted to answer.
That sounds fantastic. Can we ask a few questions?
Certainly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious, is it the same driver for the family every time, or is there switching off between drivers? Because I would think that if you're carrying kids, it's better if they have some consistency.
Yes, absolutely. We really are tailored to whatever parents' preferences are. So we have families who have, and the system is built to accommodate that. So you can set preferences to have only one driver, and we recommend that you rent your rides in advance so that we can try to reserve that person for you. You can have smaller pool of maybe 1 to 3 drivers that rotate if you have a lot of needs, or really, kind of want to maximize the chance of having a driver whenever you need one. And then we have parents, actually more parents than not, the vast majority leave it up to Kango. And that happens sometimes over time. They realize that there's so much vetting that goes into finding these caregivers who happen to be safe drivers with, spotless driving records. But so we have the whole spectrum. You can have just one driver, or you can have a pool of preferred drivers, or you can leave it up to Kango. It's up to you.
So you said you're in California and now into Arizona. What is your ultimate goal? Is this going to be countrywide, worldwide? What do you think?
Well, certainly, and I'm actually half Swiss. My experience, and I lived in Belgium and France, as both a child and a young adult, going to business school. So I believe strongly that the need is global. There's some, market variations. So that would be the pie in the sky, so to speak, but certainly, national as a next step, or even more multi-state than we are now. In fact, we have parents downloading the app or calling us or chatting with customer service every day asking, I can't believe, why are you not in Nashville? Why are you not in Atlanta? How can I book a ride? People actually trying to book a ride from across the country. So we know the demand is there.
So do you envision franchising this concept?
That's a question that we've gotten. It's a great one. A couple of concerns we have. So we have not, to date. We've had a lot of requests actually to either franchise or license the app. It's a pretty complicated system. The amount of control, though, that we feel is necessary for safety and security reasons is at a level where we haven't worked through, whether, frankly, there's any setup that we would be comfortable handing off that responsibility, to a franchisee. It's not impossible, but we haven't crossed that bridge at this point.
What's your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is, frankly, meeting demand. It takes quite a bit of work to vet and scale, with the amount of background checking and fingerprinting and, childcare experience required. There's a vast pool of folks who are qualified to do the work. Not all of them have qualifying vehicles. But, I'm happy to report that the largest problem, other than, startup funding initially to get the business off the ground, and to some degree to also continue to grow, it's really been meeting demand. So it's an interesting type of business. It's got peak periods when kids are all going to school in the morning and coming home from school in the afternoon. So you have to work around that. One of the reasons why we also carry the younger kids who might get out of preschool at 10 or 12 rather than 3 p.m. So, scaling or meeting demand as quickly as there is demand, and still remaining in a stage that we call responsible growth, because this is kids, has really been the largest challenge. But it also is a reflection of the opportunity that's out there.
So, Sara, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to work in an incubator, and then what it was like to go through the funding process? So you were one of the lucky companies that received investment funding. What was it like to work in an incubator, and then what was it like when you were going through the funding process?
Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, you're never done, right? So the story is not fully written yet. But to 500 Startups was the incubator or accelerator program that was our first investor, outside investor. It was great, I would say, for first-time founders like us. At the time, Dave McClure and still today, Christine Tsai, have been very strong supporters and really got it. But it was demanding. It was round-the-clock work, which, as a former consultant and startup person, I was used to. But it also was a constant barrage of the tough questions and a good introduction, as well as a lot of investor networking. I think that was perhaps the number one, being an experienced, professional as opposed to a 20-year-old. When I went through the accelerator with my co-founder, I think the biggest part of the value was investment, one-on-one, 101, fundraising 101, introductions to investors, really harsh feedback from the get-go on what was going to be required to raise capital and what the standards were in venture capital in Silicon Valley at the time and what opinions were about the space. That was the most valuable, was introduction to fundraising for a first-time founder for us.
Sara, I saw that you Kango partnered with Chrysler.
True. That's an interesting partnership. And I believe that there was talk earlier on the show about synergies and resources. They picked Kango for a first and only to this date of its kind partnership where they provided Kango drivers, handpicked select drivers with Kango branded Pacifica hybrid minivans, which are a great match in terms of being great mileage for drivers and also great branding for us. And at the same time, putting the target market, namely parents and kids, in front and inside of those vehicles that had just launched at the time. So that was, and we learned a lot about fleet management from our partners at Chrysler without having to own or purchase the fleet, which was really a win-win, all around. And the kids simply love those vehicles.
So Sara, can you tell me how you came up with your name? It's kind of like kangaroo, like the baby in the pouch. Is that what you're
my gosh. Naming was really hard. We were looking, because we're a service and a consumer brand, service for kids and families. We wanted an animal mascot because it would be something that was easily recognizable. There's a Kango emblem on the front and back of each vehicle. And there's all drivers wear a Kango t-shirt with a big kangaroo on it. We wanted it to be recognizable even by small kids who couldn't necessarily read, and recognizable at a distance, as vehicles pull up in the pickup line or carpool line at schools. So we wanted an animal mascot. We wanted something that had energy and was dynamic and known for moving around, but also that had a little bit of a softer side. And what better than a kangaroo that actually carries its young? We had a first iteration. It was called Kangadoo to be at the very beginning because we weren't sure what exactly the service was that we were going to land on. It ended up being pretty much transportation as the bread and butter, but that was too difficult. It was too many syllables. People weren't sure how to write it if they heard it. And then if they saw it written, they weren't sure how to pronounce it. So we actually went through a branding boot camp sponsored by one of our investors with Goodby Silverstein. And we came out of a really tough weekend, but delighted with, all right, it's Kango. Plus you literally can go. Yeah. So that's how we ended up with Kango.
I just want to compliment you. It's really interesting to hear how your thought processes go and how much thought goes into planning a business, everything from understanding the cycles to when you have to pick people up and the design of the van and the design of the name. And so there's you make it look simple, but it's really not.
So can you spell the name real quick?
Kango. So like can with a K, go, like going places, in the App Store and at kangoapp.com on the web. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, you're listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show on WOR 710, the Voice of New York. We will be right back.